Good morning and welcome here to Santa Clara to the ID TechEx show. We've got a fabulous show for you over the next few days. We have well over 3,000 people registered and many more hundreds will be coming in over the next few days during the show. We have over 220 speakers from around the world and also over 200 exhibitors. Attendees are coming from over 40 countries and there's going to be a lot of new announcements and exciting technologies spoken about. So you're probably aware by now that at this event we have one common trade show but cover a range of very much interrelated and very exciting emerging technologies. And what I want to do over the next 10 minutes or so before we kick off the event is to really give you an overview of some of the big themes that are going to be covered at this event and end up by looking at how all of these are very much interrelated. Whether you're interested in 3D printing, print electronics, wearables or electric vehicles, I'm going to show you how they all come together. So let's start off first with the first key theme, which this event will be looking at, and that is around new form factors of electronics. This is enabling new design freedoms and as a result creating new market opportunities by creating new product areas. Some of the key innovation areas here which are enabling, in this case, stretchable electronics are inks which can be printed and once they're cured they're still stretchable and retain their functionality. Then there's work going on to connect stretchable electronics to rigid components, getting good reliable interconnections. And then there's a huge amount of effort going on around sensor structures and different materials. Within the stretchable electronics field, we already see a market of $150 million this year, and that's for things like sportswear clothing and also baby infant vests, which are all on display here. And the sector is really beginning to pick up now as more material companies and more component companies are focusing on this world, moving to an industry of $3 billion in 2026. Indeed, at ID TechEx, we've found that when looking at the investments being made into this industry, 30 times the amount of money was invested into companies focusing on stretchable electronics in 2015 as it was compared to 2012. Then there's the world of structural electronics, another aspect related to new form factors and designs coming through. We introduced this last year at this event and now it's becoming commercial in many different ways. But for those of you who are fairly new to it, this is taking the old approach of components in a box, so components on rigid PCBs as they have been for almost 100 years, and turning that into something different, where we have structures which become functional components. This includes, for example, structures coated with smart skins, or ultimately load-bearing components. And structural electronics manifests itself in many different ways, and we think it's very exciting in terms of where this technology is going. For example, since last year, we have seen millions of smartphones being sold which have antennas printed onto parts of the casing. We call this 3D surface printing. Then there's others who are doing more than putting conductors on structures, but they're also mounting components onto structures. Others are developing things like in-mold electronics, where they print onto flat sheets, then thermoform them into 3D structures. And then others are even developing energy storage devices such as supercapacitors, which are also load-bearing, and that's currently being trialed for vehicles. On the bottom right here, we can see progress with energy harvesting skin. This is, for example, where the tires include new materials incorporating triboelectric energy harvesting capability, which mean that as the vehicle drives, the tires themselves can use the friction and the motion to generate energy and put that back into the power supply of the vehicle. So we at IDTechEx think structural electronics is going to be a really great significance moving forward across many different industries because it can help in many different ways, from lightweighting to saving space and also material and component cost reduction. On the other side, we also see key components increasingly becoming flexible, also part of this theme of new form factors, allowing things to really differentiate and for companies to create new markets. And two key areas where we see that are within displays and in sensors, both of which are covered strongly at this event. If we look at the display space, it's not just OLEDs that are being worked on in terms of moving towards being flexible, but also others such as flexible LCDs, e-paper, micro LEDs, and so on. Indeed, we see the market in 2026 as being over $30 billion for flexible displays, and that's being backed up now with significant investments, as you can see here on this slide, from major display companies. On the sensor side, there's lots going on. In the main, companies here are not trying to replace conventional sensors. They're using the new form factors and in some cases new capabilities to create new markets because they can do things that existing sensors would have struggled to do. And that is creating a market of almost $8 billion in 2026, thanks to everything from flexible arrays of organic photodetectors through to stretch and strain sensors, which can strain 100% and be cycled many, many times without any degradation of performance. So part of the new form factors will enable this increasing trend of more and more distributed electronics. And this is a topic which we'll be covering in our IoT themed sessions at this event. So many exhibitors will be covering this area of IoT. When we talk about IoT, we're really focusing here on IP-based sensor nodes, but it's part of a much wider story, including many wirelessly connected things. The highest volume of that being passive RFID tags, which this year, amazing 12 billion will be sold, and that's several billion more than 2015. So the numbers are really going up at great rates each year for passive RFID, thanks to strong price reduction as these volumes have increased. The main highlight there being tagging of clothing. On the other side of the scale, for things like IP-based sensor nodes, usually with a power supply or energy harvesting component to power them, these cost more. We are seeing the components of these still come down significantly, with microcontroller units being as little as 30 cents now. These going into, for example, everything from smart meters to sensor nodes appearing in Industry 4.0 and beyond. And at this event, what we're going to do, as well as covering the latest technology progress with all of these wirelessly sensor technologies, is to really focus on who's making money and what are the short to medium term opportunities, because there's certainly a lot of hype about some aspects of these, but at the same time there's also a lot of opportunity, and we want to uncover that. And you'll be hearing about many case studies, implementations, payback cases, but also going forward where the money is. So everything I've spoken about now has mainly been to do with low power electronics, albeit very high volume electronics, and the impact that will make on everything from healthcare to consumer electronics. But there's a whole other world of electronics and electricals which we're going to cover at this event, and that's around the much higher power side of it. And that trend, which we've spotted and which we're covering at this event, is this. It's the greater electrification of things all around us. And nowhere is this more prevalent than within the automotive industry, which is set for huge amounts of exciting disruption going forward. Of course, with the onset now of autonomous vehicles, we can envisage perhaps in 2030 a peak car scenario, following the peak horse scenario around 1920 when people started buying cars to get around rather than relying on horses. Thanks to autonomous vehicles embedded with sensors and computing power in them, it will mean that by 2030 we will have more effective utilization of vehicles rather than them sitting on your driveway for 95% of the time, and therefore the number of cars sold may go down as a result. But this industry will have many different surprises moving forward. The trend, of course, is towards electric vehicles. But based on the extensive research ID TechEx has done on the electric vehicle market, in 2027, it's not clear to us at all that the market will be around electric cars, as most, I think, would imagine reading mainstream media. No. At ID TechEx, we've found that in 2027, 65% of the market value of electric vehicles will be in industrial and commercial EVs, 34% of the complete market being for electric buses, for example. The other exciting development is that while many would ultimately see plug-in pure electric vehicles as the end game for the automotive industry, at IDTechEx we see beyond that, looking into the future, and we actually see the end game being energy-independent vehicles. That means vehicles which are completely self-powered thanks to energy harvesting, which is on their structure, including things like regeneration of energy from braking systems. And so the winners in that scenario are indeed very different versus the winners in the plug-in pure electric scenario. Is that all a dream? Well, actually, no, it's not. It's here with us today. Here's an example of an energy-independent vehicle, and you've probably seen it because it's here in North America for the first time at this event, and it's outside, and you could have seen it when you came in. The team are on hand, and you'll be hearing much more about this vehicle later this morning. It's the Nuna electric car, and this is a combination of several technologies which we're going to be covering at this show. It includes structural electronics by having PV across the structure of this vehicle, followed by energy harvesting. Some parts are made by 3D printing. All in all, culminating in what they claim to be the world's most efficient vehicle. And you'll be hearing from the Nuon Solar team a bit later, and you can certainly see their car over the next few days. It's quite an exciting development. But energy-independent vehicles, and in this case it's one because it doesn't require to be plugged in at all, it's powered completely by the sun. They're not just something that's used at academia to win these prestige races. No. Earlier this year, Hanergy China announced a series of vehicles which are based on solar cell technology based on gallium arsenide from their subsidiary Alta Devices, who are here exhibiting at this event. And this has lightweight and very high efficiency PV, which can be used to power vehicles, and their intention is to commercialize these in 2020. So that's part of energy harvesting, another topic we're covering here at this event. And we're looking at the full range of energy harvesting capability from megawatts to milliwatts. Usually the high power side is mainly involving electrical engineering, and we think will have the highest market value going forward. But there's still plenty of opportunity around the lower power side, which is mainly focused on powering electronics. An example of that being the clean space gas sensors, which are powered by ambient RF, such as Wi-Fi fields around you, 3G, 4G RF fields as well, trickle charging a battery which can then power this pollution sensor. And that's a device which has been successfully sold. And just a few years ago, it seemed unlikely that companies could efficiently harvest energy from stray RF. Well, now it's a commercial product, and this company are here at this event. But there's much more to energy harvesting than just those examples, as you can see on this chart here. Energy harvesting covers a range of different energy generation technologies, from piezoelectric to thermoelectric, and so on. And we'll be covering all of these at this event, and particularly the highlights of latest development. But one of the exciting new trends we've seen is around triboelectric energy harvesting. And as shown on the picture here with an animal's heart, it's already been demonstrated in China that the motion of the heart can generate enough energy using a triboelectric energy harvester to power a wireless sensor. The other trend which will be covered involving energy harvesting is this move to multimodal energy harvesting. So what you see in this fabric in the top center here is a combination of solar energy harvesting, triboelectric, so it can now generate energy from motion and movement of the fabric, all as part of a fabric which is inherently somewhat stretchable. So it's a combination of many of the different things I've mentioned, generating energy in different ways from different sources, but in one device. Of course, energy harvesting is one aspect, but there's also a lot of work going on around storing energy. And at this event, we are covering the latest progression here. Lithium-ion battery technologies have been a great technology, but they've really mainly seen incremental improvements over the last 10 years. Consumers are demanding magnitude performance increase and cost reduction, versus what they've currently been seeing. And so the gold rush is on. Companies looking at a range of different battery technologies beyond conventional lithium-ion technologies. And this event will be covering it all, with companies looking at these different options, including taking into account, of course, all the considerations such as safety and so on. And we'll be assessing that given the high-profile issues that companies have had recently with their batteries. And it's not just all about performance and cost, it's also about new form factors, going back to my original point. And this event will also be covering the latest innovations around thin, flexible batteries. And here are some of the applications shown at the bottom, with a lot of user pull now coming from the wearable sector to use such batteries to make their components and gadgets more invisible to the user. So riding on top all of these key themes, which we're covering at the event, is the huge amount of material innovation that's also coming through. And at this event, you'll have noticed that many of our exhibitors, and you'll see that many of our attendees as well, represent material companies who are enabling the many things I've mentioned and many more to come. It includes everything from covering latest progress with conductive inks, including things like stretchable inks, which are now being used in model electronics on white goods appliances sold in the US. And that's a fairly new product and based on in-model electronics, which was really only developed just a few years ago. In other cases, we've seen the success of things like carbon nanotubes after many years in the wilderness, where they're now being used in enormous quantities in batteries. The highlight there being batteries for electric buses. And in addition to the other materials listed here, we'll also be looking at new developments with things like 3D printed materials, such as 3D printed silicone, which has received a lot of attention when it was released this year. And all of that will be covered at the show. And it's not just materials, of course, that one needs to look at. We also need to see at how we can put these things down. Hence, this event also strongly focuses on all the different manufacturing innovations coming through. From 3D printing, where the hype is now over with the hobbyist printer market, and we're now focusing on things that are really growing extensively, which includes aspects like 3D metal printing, to a combination of 3D printing with printed electronics, which is 3D printed electronics, as shown on the top right here, putting down functional materials and pick and placing components onto structures which are 3D, which you print. And then also looking at progress which others are doing, which are rapid circuit prototyping, in some cases on flexible substrates, where multi-layer PCBs can now be created by printing, allowing you to turn around these devices very quickly, keep your IP in-house, do rapid prototyping, and so on. There's still a lot of opportunity going forward in the manufacturing space, and IDTechEx, one area we think in particular is as we increasingly move to things like flexible electronics, there is a need for having devices and equipment which can manage putting these things together. For example, if you have a thinned flexible IC and you're trying to mount them on a flexible substrate at high speed, it's challenging to do. And so these sorts of issues are now being worked on, and you'll be hearing more about these manufacturing innovations around, if you like, hybrid devices at the event. So all in all, and this is just a brief view of some of the key trends of the event, I hope I've shown to you that many of these things are very much interrelated, whether you're involved in wearables, in IoT, in consumer electronics, in electric vehicles, in large-scale energy storage. Many of these things have applicability to you. And that's one of the reasons why we've structured the shows we have, with one common trade show covering the whole supply chain, from materials companies through to end components and complete solutions. So you can see it all in one place, because there is great overlap between these different things. So if, for example, you are an OEM, a consumer electronics company or a car company, you can see what is coming through from materials companies and component providers that you could build into your roadmap. Similarly, if you're a material company or component company, you can meet with those OEMs and brands and understand what are their problems and challenges so you can design appropriate solutions for them. Above all, the thing we try and achieve at this event is to really focus on the commercialization of these technologies. We've been looking at emerging technologies for many years here at IDTechEx, and of course there's always an element of technology push. And so what we try and do this event is have large brands talk about, and there are also of course many in attendance, talk about really what are the issues they're facing, what they need from the industry so that suppliers here can meet those requirements. So let me tell you a bit about the show before we get stuck in, and I'll hand you over to the cornerstones. So who's here? We have a great mixture of people, as you can see from the charts here. If we look at who's here by value chain positioning, 21% are materials companies, 23% make components, 16% make equipment, and 21% are end users, the rest being research institutes and press. Overall, we have 23% more pre-registered attendees versus last year. We're over 3,000 people now, and we expect to be well over our target of 3,500 people due to the people registering over the next few days. And these attendees are all coming from, at least for now, 45 countries. So it truly is an international event. Looking at the exhibition, we have 209 exhibitors from 23 countries, again quite evenly spread in terms of where positioning over the value chain. Our platinum sponsor this year is Novacentrics. They've got a fabulous booth, lots of things to see, including much of their partners' work, so do take time to have a look at that. And our gold sponsors are Agfa, Bebop Sensors, Linear Technology, and Xenon. And as you can see from the sponsor list, there's a wide variety of companies from contract manufacturers through to component providers, equipment companies, material companies, and as I've said several times, it's really the full value chains in one place. Here's the trade show floor, and I just wanted to point out a few highlights for it. It's a large trade show floor. We're using all the 4 halls this year at this show, so make sure you do find enough time to get to the back of it and meet everyone. A couple of things I'd like to point out. This is the second year we're running our IDTechEx Launchpad initiative, and the point of this initiative is that there's so many exciting technologies and coming through from startups and being launched from academia. We really wanted to give those organizations a chance to put themselves on the world stage and meet the international audience at this event. So we launched this initiative, and we selected carefully 18 winners from everyone that applied. And all of these organizations will be showing working prototypes. Many of them will be showing things for the very first time here. It ranges from everything from smart plasters or smart band-aids through to complete energy independent vehicles. So make sure you take a look at those 2 launchpad areas. Other areas include Demonstration Street. That's our collection of samples that our analysts have collected as we walk around the world, meeting companies as we profile them as part of our research. And this is where you can see many things that you may only have read about. And at Manufacturing Street, people will be running their machinery, so you can ask those experts on hand all about it. We've also launched an app just for this event. Just go to your app store, search IDTechEx and download it. It'll help you to be more productive, we hope, at this show. It's got the full agendas, it's got the exhibitor list and much more. So please go ahead and do that, and it's your pocket show guide if you like. And then we'll be all over Twitter, so please share your discoveries and join in the conversations. Just use hashtag IDTechEx. So before we get stuck in, I just wanted to update you on some of the progress here at IDTechEx, especially for those of you who are new to the company. Of course, we are the host of this event, and what this event is really one way in which we can help our clients to understand what's going on around the world in their technology scouting mode. But we do more than just events. We are a technology scouting and research company focusing on these different emerging technologies, and our value is to provide clarity to our clients on these different areas. We have a team of fantastic analysts who spend a lot of their time going around the world profiling what's going on in these different sectors. And from that all, we do everything from forecasting to providing strategic advice as to how companies should get into these different markets. So if you have any questions or you're interested in us helping you with any of that in order to grow your business, don't hesitate to come to our stand. We've got a big booth here. Many of our analysts are on it, and we'd be delighted to talk to you. But indeed, even if you just have questions about the technology, something you've seen and you don't understand how it fits in, or you want to ask some questions about some technology you're developing or you want to use, also come by. We're here to help you so you get most from this event. So without further ado, we've got a superb lineup. The next few presentations, the Cornerstone presentations, are really going to do a great job, I think, to set the big picture, to give you a big idea as to how these technologies, in a more detailed way, are making a big impact and what's still needed. Firstly, we have Heidi Doser from Google, who will be looking at the medical wearable space, in particular using the data from all these new medical and wearable devices coming through to provide a better medication and service for people. Then we have from Unilever, John Snow, who's a global customer packaging manager. Unilever, one of the world's largest consumer goods company. You use their products probably every single day, and they'll be telling you, at least from a retail and brand perspective, as to what are the things that they're looking for from these technologies. And then we'll hear from Dr. Bomick from Intel. Dr. Bomick is the VP and GM of Perceptual Computing, and he's working on the RealSense technology platform, which is their 3D imaging platform, which is as relevant to 3D printing as it is to drones and other types of autonomous vehicles. So he'll be telling us about the latest developments there. And then you'll hear about that fabulous energy-independent vehicle, which I showed earlier from the Nuon Solar team, thanks to Winifred Norlander. So we've got a great lineup of Cornerstone speakers. After that, the trade show will open. And then following that, we'll break into these multiple conference tracks on each of the individual topics. These will kick off first with an ID TechEx analyst giving you the analyst view as to what's going on in the sector. It's packed full of data, latest trends and analyses. So that will be your update as to what's going on in those industries. And that will be followed by the keynotes in each of these topics, talking about key developments in those topics. And that will be then the launch pad into the full program. So I hope you have a great show. There's plenty to see. Please do approach any member of the IDTechEx team if you have any questions, or we can help you in any way to make your experience even better. And otherwise, just have fun. So without further ado, let's invite up the first speaker, Heidi Doser from Google.